Apple's darkest days, the comeback nobody expected. Today, Apple is one of the most powerful companies on earth. A company worth trillions, a brand recognized in every corner of the world. The creator of the iPhone, MacBook, and products millions can't live without. But what if I told you there was a time when Apple was only 90 days away from collapse? A time when employees feared losing everything, investors had lost hope, and experts believed Apple would disappear forever. This is not just the story of a company. This is the story of survival, betrayal, failure, and one of the greatest comebacks in business history. This is the story of Apple's darkest days.
Chapter 1: The Rise of a Revolution. In 1976, two young men started building computers inside a small garage in California. One was a brilliant engineer, the other was a visionary. Their names were Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. At a time when computers were huge, expensive machines used only by big companies, Apple wanted to put a computer into ordinary homes. And against all odds, people loved it. The Apple II became a massive success. Money started pouring in. Apple became one of the fastest growing companies in America. Steve Jobs was only in his 20s, yet he was already becoming a legend. But success can sometimes create dangerous confidence, and Apple was about to enter its most chaotic period. Chapter 2. The man who was fired from his own company, Steve Jobs, wanted Apple to change the future forever. He pushed employees harder than ever before. Some admired him, others feared him. Then came the Macintosh, a revolutionary computer with a graphical interface that looked years ahead of its time. But behind the scenes, Apple's leadership was falling apart. Internal fights exploded. Executives clashed with Steve Jobs constantly. Sales problems started growing. And then, the unthinkable happened. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple. The company he created, the company he loved, fired him. Imagine building your dream from nothing, only to be thrown out of it. For Apple, this moment changed everything. And not in a good way.
Chapter 3. Apple begins to collapse. At first, Apple tried to move forward without Steve Jobs. But year after year, the company became more confused. Too many products, no clear direction. Failed experiments, falling sales. Meanwhile, another company was quietly taking over the world, Microsoft. Windows computers became cheaper and more popular. Apple started losing customers fast. By the mid-1990s, Apple was bleeding money. Millions of dollars disappeared. Projects failed. Employees were stressed and afraid. Some experts publicly predicted Apple would go bankrupt. And inside Apple's offices, the atmosphere was terrifying. People whispered in hallways. Teams were shutting down. Nobody knew if the company would survive another year. Then came the shocking truth. Apple was dangerously close to death. Some reports claimed the company had only a few months left before total collapse. The world believed Apple was finished, but nobody knew a comeback was coming. Chapter 4. The Return of Steve Jobs. After leaving Apple, Steve Jobs started another company called Next. Ironically, Apple later bought Next in a desperate attempt to save itself. And with that deal, Steve Jobs returned. At first, nobody knew what would happen. Would he fail again? Could one man really save a dying company? Then Steve Jobs made brutal decisions. He cut unnecessary products, he fired struggling projects, he simplified everything. Employees were shocked, but for the first time in years, Apple finally had direction. Then came a partnership nobody expected. Microsoft invested $150 million into Apple. Yes, the same Microsoft that had nearly destroyed Apple was now helping keep it alive. The audience booed when the announcement happened. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. But Steve Jobs didn't care. He wasn't trying to protect Apple's pride. He was trying to save its life. Chapter 5. The product that changed everything. Then, in 1998, Apple revealed something different. The iMac. Bright colors, beautiful design, simple experience. It didn't look like any computer people had ever seen before. And suddenly, people started paying attention again. The iMac became a huge success. But Steve Jobs wasn't finished. Next came the iPod, then iTunes. And finally, in 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage holding a small device that would change the world forever. The iPhone. Everything changed after that moment. Apple went from a struggling company to one of the most powerful businesses in human history. The company that was once near bankruptcy was now leading the future. Ending the lesson. Apple's story is more than business. It's proof that failure is not always the end. Sometimes the darkest moments come right before the greatest comeback. A company that the world had given up on became one of the most valuable brands on earth. And it all happened because someone refused to quit. Steve Jobs once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." Maybe that's why Apple survived. Not because the journey was easy, but because they kept fighting when everyone else thought it was over. From near bankruptcy to changing the world, Apple's comeback changed business history forever.